Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to some. Welcome to the first session of the Field Hockey Canada Conference. Thanks so much for registering. We really appreciate it. If you missed our welcome video, it's on YouTube. You can check it out. But thanks so much for tuning in to all the sessions, and the engagement online and the registration has been through the roof. So we're really proud and excited to bring this first session to you. Today we've got Jenn Beagan on the line. Jenn is going to lead a session about coaching championship programs. Also on the line, we have Grace Lee and Haley Yap, and myself, Kevin. We'll be the sort of back-end hosts, moderators as well. So, but more about Jenn. She's a working coach in the hockey community. You probably know her, or at the very least recognize her email address. She also chairs the Coach Education Committee for Field Hockey Canada, and we're thrilled to have her leading today's session. Just a few housekeeping notes. The session is going to take about an hour. Jenn will take us through her presentation. She'll also be encouraging some engagement to ask questions and answer questions through the chat box. So just so everyone knows, please keep your mics muted just to limit any echo, and your cameras off. We recommend that you watch in, I think it's called presenter view or speaker view. So you can see Jenn and her presentation, and you're not muddled up with all of our faces or all your little icons around. But you can view however you so desire. If you have a question, please feel free to write it into the chat box. Please post it in the public chat box. If you're a little shy about that and you want to just ask a question privately, you can direct it to me and I'll feed it through to Jenn during the presentation. And at the end of the session, we'll be sending out a session survey, and please feel free to fill that out. It would be awesome to get feedback on our session, especially as we go along throughout the week. So, and then if you're counting this session towards your NCCP maintenance, please indicate that in the exit survey. There's a spot for you to write your NCCP number, and then we'll go in and make sure you get your points. Jenn will actually do that. So that's pretty much it. And then last reminder, don't forget to download your conference bingo card and fill it out and share it on social media. It gives us, you have a chance to win some prizes, and it's just an awesome way to engage with all of you. So final shout out, thanks to our sponsors, Griffin Hockey, Osaka Hockey, and Frontline Medical Supply for all the support that they give to Field Hockey Canada. And without further ado, Jenn, I'm going to hand it over to you. Please fire away and have fun, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Okay, so I just want to first acknowledge that I'm honored to be presenting to you today from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And I do encourage you to take a moment from wherever you are to acknowledge the land on which you're participating today. So a bit about myself and my hockey background. As Kevin said, my name's Jenn Beagan. And I didn't actually start playing hockey till a little bit later. I think I was 13 or 14 when my family moved from Calgary to Vancouver, and during spring league season, and it's kind of what everyone did. So I needed to meet some friends. That's what my parents put me into hockey, and that was my big start. But I played through the club system here in BC and for various provincial teams and junior national teams before heading off to the NCAA to play university hockey in the States. So I've played in a variety of different contexts. I came back from the US with a master's degree in architecture and worked as an architect for quite a few years before coming to my senses and realizing that I was really not cut out for a desk job. But I had done a lot of coaching, both while I was in the US and for Field Hockey BC, and I do really enjoy learning about the science of coaching and about athlete development. And I was glad to make the flip into a more full-time coaching role. I'm a CSC chartered professional coach, and I have a competition development certification and an advanced coaching diploma. And I'm also an NCCP and FIH coach developer. So like Kevin said, I've been working with FHC to help push forward the coach education system across the country. So if you've been getting prompts for NCCP education stuff, that's kind of what I've been working on. But since I quit my architecture job about 5 years ago, I've been really privileged to work in all contexts of coaching, grassroots programs and schools programs and provincial teams, and a little bit with the Next Gen Women in Vancouver. And I really am grateful every day that I get to work with some amazing and inspiring athletes and coaches. And I'm excited to talk to you guys today on a topic that I'm really passionate about. Let's see if I can, oops. This thing is doing its. All right, so I'm going to talk about how coaching championship teams really starts with building a solid foundation to your team environment and the team culture, as well as how to create buy-in. And then I'm going to talk about a bit of a case study of all these elements in action. Just a few housekeeping points before I get started. So I'm going to be sharing a lot of info, but also asking questions and looking for a little bit of engagement. So please use the public chat. I know we've done this before, and sometimes I get questions coming at me in a private message. And most likely, if you send your questions directly to me, I'm not gonna see it. I'm only gonna be looking at the public chat. So please use that. And also, there's obviously too many people to open cameras and mics, but I do want to have the opportunity to engage with you guys and for you to ask questions and also to create some conversation. So let's just try to use the public chat to do that. And then if you have questions along the way, ask them, but there will be a Q&A at the end, so you can save them up. What makes an impactful coach? So it's probably a question that you've been asked before, but just think about a coach that's been impactful in your life, that's really made a difference in your life. And I want to know what you remember about their coaching. So you can share a couple of words in the chat box about how that coach made you feel, or what made them the best coach that you've ever had. This is where you type things into the chat. So an impactful coach in your life. Is it traits or abilities that they had? What makes you remember that coach? Indy says trust, belief, opportunity, patience, empowered, a coach that supports your aspirations, keeps the athletes engaged. Those are great. Helped me to understand the game. Good. Charlotte says encouraging you to go outside your comfort zone but still be safe. Willing to work with and develop the athletes. Good, I love that. So the point being here is it's not only the technical details that makes a good coach, it's really the human aspect that makes the biggest impact in the life of an athlete. So when we talk about coaching championship teams, we really have to think about the human components about that and not just the X's and O's of the game. So the next question to consider then is, what is a championship environment or a championship culture? And I think your answer to this question is probably going to depend directly on what your definition of success is. Is success standing on a podium, or is success a little bit more intangible than that? So again, I'm curious what you think. Either write it down for yourself just so that you have it, or feel free to share it in the comments as well. But what is your definition of success? What is championship to you? And I think it's also important to recognize that developing culture and environment is necessary for every context of coaching on every team. So it doesn't really matter the age or the developmental stage, whether you're grassroots or high performance. Considering what it means to be a champion is really going to set up how you build your program. So keep this in mind, and we're going to come back to it towards the end. So let's get started with the foundation. You may be familiar with Simon Sinek and this book, Start With Why. And he explains in here what he calls the golden circle. He's done lots of TED Talks and interviews explaining this idea, so it's pretty easy to look up. But basically, he talks about how inspiring leaders of teams, whether they're business organizations or in the sport world, can enroll people around them into the benefits of buying what they're selling. So there's a famous quote that people don't buy what you're selling, they buy why you're selling it. And to put that into our context, the what you're doing is easy. Everyone knows what you do. You're coaching hockey, or maybe you're an athlete and you're playing hockey. But to take that a little bit deeper, the how is a little bit more difficult. Good coaches or good players spend a lot of time here, and they refining how they play or how they coach, and learning and trying new things and getting really good at how you coach hockey. But I think the why is the really important part. And that's the part that takes more effort. And it's also why it's the reason people come together. So organizations and teams and coaches and players and parents and all of these different kind of arms can come together. And without that why, it's hard to develop the culture and the environment conducive to reaching big goals. So when you think about a new team or a group that you're going to be working with, it's important to identify the why. And for me, my why comes directly from my coaching philosophy. And I would define philosophy as a way of thinking about life that guides a person's actions and behaviors. So just so that I know, how many people on the line today have a coaching philosophy? Give me a quick yes or no. Yes, yes, yes. Good. Anyone else? Great. So if you said yes, even if you didn't type it, if you said no, that's all right as well. Is your coaching philosophy written down, and do you use it every day? Do you call on it every day? I think all great coaches have a personal philosophy, and it colors the way they teach and it colors the way they communicate, and acting on that philosophy helps to clarify what you intend to do or even justify why you do what you do. So I'm going to share my beliefs around creating a philosophy, and there's no right way that this can be done. This is just kind of how I do it. So for me, I think there's 3 components that come together for the philosophy. The first is having a really clear set of core values. And this puts a frame of reference around the things that you expect from yourself, but also the things that you expect from the athlete group, whether they're individuals or athletes as teams. And then your core values and your expectations create certain behaviors. And those behaviors are the actions that you take in order to get certain expected outcomes. So in a team environment, I think the strength of the coach's core values, it will impact the team and ultimately the results that you can get out of that team. And you can do Google searches on core values, and you can find lists of hundreds and hundreds of core values. This list here is just about 50 that I pulled out that I think could easily be applied to team coaching environments. So what I want you to do is just read through this list, and I'm going to give you a couple seconds here. Using the list or add values of your own, that's fine too. I want you to choose 10 that mean something to you and that you kind of connect with. So pick 10 and write them down. So these 10 should be the first words that pop out to you when you look at this list. And then what I want you to do is narrow that list of 10 that you identified down to 5. And then when you have your top 5, I want you to pick your 3. So the 3 words that really inspire and motivate you. And when you have your 3, if you could share them in the comments, please. Don't think too hard about it. Just pick the words that stand out to you. Good. Karen says encouragement, growth, enjoyment. Allie, trust, motivation, growth. Hi, Allie. Jeff says trust, professionalism, resilience. Professionalism, growth, trust. Good. These are great. So notice that everyone's is slightly different, and that's perfect. No two coaches are the same, and no two belief systems are going to be identical. Opportunity, community, growth. Sarah, those are great. So when you have these three values that you connect with, the next thing to ask yourself is, what do these words mean to you? And what expectations can you create for yourself that are going to reflect your commitment to these values? So for example, if you've identified fun as a core value, how are you going to make sure that that value is actioned on the field? And what expectations are you going to create to make sure that that value is clear? So remember what I said before, that values inform expectations, and your expectations require certain behaviors in order to be successful. So in this short activity, you can do it on your own, but it will really help to build out your values into an actionable philosophy. So in this example that I put up here, the value that I chose is integrity. And you have to first define what that value means, and then you can go about identifying some expectations that relate to it. So one of my expectations related to integrity is that I believe it's important and respectful to be on time and prepared for every session. So for me, I'll always be on time. In fact, those of you that know me know that I'm always early. Prepared with a training plan, and I usually have all the equipment on the field set up, and everything's always ready to go for the session. Well, similarly, I expect that the athletes hold themselves accountable in the same way. I want them to arrive early. I want them to have their equipment on and ready to go. They've done their team warm up, and they're also ready to step on the field and learn when it's time for the session to start. So to help you identify some value-based expectations that's related to your three words, let's just brainstorm for a second what this might look like. So what kinds of things in a team environment do you think it's important to have expectations around? So what I'm looking for are things that can be regulated and actioned that are in line with your core values. You can share your thoughts in the chat. But keep in mind that the expectations you set have to be age and stage appropriate, and they are going to vary depending on the context that you're coaching in. But what kind of things can you create expectations around? So for example, to kick this off, I think you can set expectations around routine. So arriving at the team, warm-up routines, cool-down routines. Sometimes you would have a structured mental performance routine. We obviously have expectations around fitness, conditioning. What do you think? What do you think in your coaching context and related to your value words would be some expectations that you might want to think through? Karen, getting to know your teammates. So Karen, by that, do you mean you would expect that the teammates would get to know each other and communicate with each other, maybe choose a different partner every time you pass? Is that what you're meaning by that? You coach high school. Get to know the students from different grades. Right, good, I like that one. Arrive with good positive energy, good. Accountability, everyone takes ownerships for their actions, good and bad. Communication about training, I like that one. In the advance request about potential absence. So there's lots of expectations that you can set up around communication. How do you want your athletes to communicate with you? Verbal and nonverbal communication standards, social media expectations. Resilience in fitness testing, we expect the girls to go until they're pulled out and not when they feel fatigue and pull themselves out. Good, so expectations around execution on the field and behaviors and grit and determination, holding yourselves accountable. Good. So then when you create expectations that are related to your values, you also then have to be prepared to hold the group accountable for those behaviors that are necessary to meet the expectations. So keep in mind here, and kind of when you're thinking through this, there's a difference between the expectation and the behavior needed to meet that expectation. So to use this integrity as the example, if the value is integrity and the expectation is that you're on time, then some of the behaviors that come out of that are things like you would expect that they allow for appropriate time for travel, especially if there's traffic. You would expect that they're communicating if it's likely that they're going to be absent, or if they know they're going to be late. Excuse me. Also, behaviors around, like, life happens, people are late sometimes, and unknown things happen, but what behavior do you want an athlete to take if they do arrive late? Right? Do you want them to kind of wander in at their own on their own pace and sneak into the drill, or do you want them to run in, do a quick warm up, and then acknowledge and take responsibility for the fact that they're late? How do you want that behavior to show up in your environment? So when you put the three components together, they kind of create your guide or your philosophy. And having a complete philosophy means that you've thought through the results you want to get based on your value and belief system. And then putting it all together creates a really clear statement of, this is what I stand for, or this is what you can expect from me. And I really think it's not enough just to think about it. You do need to write it down, and you have to be very clear on your expectations. And then be prepared to adjust it or change it for every team that you coach, because it is a live document, it's a working document. So you are going to need to revisit it. And also consider how you're going to communicate this to the group that you're leading, and if your actions on and off the field are always in line with your values. So just to share what I mean by write down your philosophy. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do that, but this is my coaching philosophy. And I always like to start out a new group by talking about this so that the athletes and the parents can get an idea of what I stand for and what drives my decision making. So the way I have it organized, you can see along the top is my values: integrity, excellence, growth, accountability. And then I have my philosophy statement, which starts with I believe as a coach, and that basically outlines what I think my job is. And then I have what I call my supporting pillars, and those pillars hold up my values. And those are try big, fail big, learn big, professionalism over perfectionism, life skills focused, and fun breeds excellence. And then for each of those, I have a definition, so what that is. I have the measures, or the things that I intend to do, the how, and then the objectives or the outcomes that the athlete can expect to take away from my program. So just to highlight one of them, this one, try big, fail big, learn big, speaks to each athlete's relationship with failure and how I intend to cultivate growth mindset and the belief that you have to fail in order to succeed. So here I've defined what that means. And then I've identified some of the behaviors that I am going to take as a coach to support that belief. And those are things like reassuring and encouraging the athletes, but also expecting them to be uncomfortable, or always answering a question with a question. I always like to give the athletes the opportunity to make decisions and make choices and figure out answers on their own. And then I identified outcomes that the athletes can expect to take away. And those are things like athletes will always feel valued and supported, and athletes will be encouraged to make their own decisions, or they'll learn tools and strategies to deal with failure and move forward with confidence. So altogether, that's my philosophy. And before I move on into the next steps, are there any questions about philosophy? No, great. Okay, well, let's talk about the next steps then. Buy-in. You have a clear set of personal values and you have a well thought through philosophy. You have to now enroll your athletes into your version of why. As dictatorships are rarely successful, you really have to connect your expectations with something that's identifiable to the team so that they can relate to the concepts and be inspired and motivated. Like, they're putting in all this hard work, they have to be connected to it. So how do you do that? How do you go about getting buy-in from your athletes? And this is what I think. 4 steps, in my opinion. First of all, prior preparation. So what we just talked about, know and live your philosophy for yourself every day. Number 2, involve the athletes. Number 3, enroll the parent group. And then number 4, you really have to have a clear communication that creates value-based connections with your group. So you have to have consistent routines, and you have to have vocabulary that reflect your values. And I think you're gonna know, like, if you're really careful about your communication, you're gonna know that you're starting to get buy-in when you start to recognize those behaviors of the athletes on the field, reflecting the routines and vocabulary that you use. And then once you start to hear the athletes also referring to their own behaviors and holding each other accountable with the same vocabulary and the same value-based language that you use, then you know that you've done your job right. So when we talk about involving the athletes, how do we go about doing that? There's a million different ways that you could do that. This is one example. And the process for involving the group can be different for every team, and definitely is going to need to be adjusted for the age and the stage and even sometimes the gender of the athletes that you're coaching. But regardless, the individuals in the group have to connect with the vision and the reason behind all of these expectations, or they're not going to follow them. So we have to make sure that the group has input. Each athlete needs to feel like they are valued and that they have a voice in what they're doing. But the nice thing is that as the coach, you are able to steer the group towards identifying values that are in alignment with your own. And you can do that by asking leading questions and then allowing them to arrive at their own solutions. So this, what I have here on the screen, is just an example of some directed questioning that you could use. And it can be done, you can set it up to be like a big team meeting or split it into a few smaller meetings, but however you do it, the process needs to start before you even get to the field. Breaking existing behavior habits is very hard to do, but setting expectations that create positive behaviors is not so hard. It's actually pretty easy. So I've set this up in 2 clear sections. The first talks about what is the identity of the team? Like, why are you a team? Why do you exist? What do you want to achieve? What are your goals as a group? What are your goals as individuals within a group? And then also, like, what are the roles? What are you going to call yourself? What is each individual within this team environment responsible for? And then the second section talks about the things that the team is going to need to do in order to achieve those goals. So I'm really identifying what behavior is okay and what behavior is not okay for this group. What routines and what behaviors do we want to see and hold ourselves accountable, and how are we going to actually do that? How are we going to communicate with each other? What tools are we going to use to communicate with each other? And importantly, setting up some measures so that the group knows that they're moving towards their goals, and it's a visible it's a visible step-by-step process. So Indy has a question here. Thoughts on athletes building the vision, coach adapting to the team desire and needs? Is it easier to have one person adapt versus 16? Yeah, I think, Indy, it's a good question. I think as a coach, you have to be prepared for what the team is going to set out. And if you facilitate a conversation, what the team identifies as their team values, it's okay if they're different from yours. I think the coach needs to adapt to the group, but the way that the coach sets up the meeting, facilitates the meeting, and communicates with the athletes is going to have an impact in what they ultimately decide to do. So I think it is a little bit of both. So step 3, once you've enrolled the athletes and you've had that meeting and they've set out their goals, then we need to share it, and we also need to enroll the parent group into not just what the athletes have decided that their goals and what they want to achieve are, but also in your philosophy as a coach and how you're going to relate to both the athletes and then also to the parent group. And this is a really, really important step. Teams don't work without parents. Reaching big goals can be really challenging for athletes, and especially when you get into development and high performance environments. Athletes are stretched past their limits physically, mentally, socially, and as the coach, you can't always be there at all times. You only see them on the field. You can't help them through all the situations. So it's really important that there is a support at home in upholding behaviors that the team has identified, even under fatigue, even under stress. For a lot of our athletes, balancing academic commitments is really, really stressful for them. So if a parent understands why the expectations have been set up and they can get excited about the long-term goals and achievements that their athlete is working towards, then they're likely to support the athlete at home in alignment with all these behaviors that are necessary to achieve the goals. Another example of why enrolling parents early is important is because sometimes the expectations or the behaviors that you're trying to teach might be different from a way a certain family operates, or it might just be a new concept. For example, it's important within my philosophy to teach life skills that promote performance behaviors. And one of those things for me is working on the athlete's autonomy and personal responsibility. So I typically like to communicate directly with athletes. I want to receive communication from them. I want them to talk to me. I want them to email me, not always the parents. Of course, there's some instances where it's necessary for the parents and I to communicate, but when it comes to attendance training or being late, or if they get an injury, or if they need help with schedule management, I want to get that communication from the athletes. And a lot of parents, especially of younger athletes, are used to managing their child's schedule and they're used to doing that communication for them. So it can be a really big change. But I think if you go to a parent and say, hey, I'm not just going to teach your kid how to play hockey. I'm going to teach your kid how to communicate with an adult, how to be clear with what they need, how to manage their own carpool and get themselves to the field and make sure that they have their equipment. The parent is not going to be, they're not going to say no, right? So if you enroll the parents into what you're trying to do, they will support you and they'll support the behaviors necessary for the athlete to have those things in their life at home. So whatever it is that your values and your messaging is, transparency with the parent group needs to happen in order to have ongoing support. Sarah, the helicopter parent of an athlete is super challenging. Yes, it is. I agree. So I just want to go back to this slide that I had at the beginning. What is a championship environment? And I believe that basing your program around solid values and clear expectations and common behaviors leads to a championship culture and performance outcomes. It's the culture that makes learning possible, and it's the culture that keeps kids in sport and inspires leaders and encourages growth and development. So let's talk about these concepts in action, a little bit of a case study here. So just to set it up, the team that I'm going to talk about here is an under 15 girls provincial team from BC. And this was a few years ago, five or 6 years ago, I think, before the regional provincial programs came into play. So they came from all different clubs, from the Vancouver mainland, from the island regions, and the athletes, importantly, did not know each other. Most of them had never met or had never played together before. And most of them were also playing in a performance environment for the first time. So we had a responsibility as a staff to introduce them to performance expectations and behaviors, in addition to addressing technical skills and teaching style of play and tactical structure and game concepts. And we had to turn this group of 16 strangers into a team in a very short period of time. So anyone that's coached a provincial team is probably familiar with this challenge. It's about 6 weeks of training and 2 tournaments. But I'd made a decision prior to getting this group of athletes that I wanted to focus on teaching them performance behaviors, not just hockey skills and not just tactics, but actual performance behaviors that would address the intangible aspect of sport and then set them up for future success. So like life skills and leadership and personal accountability and supportive skills like structured goal setting and mental performance, nutrition, recovery, physical preparation. And I was really lucky with this group. I had a great staff. Kate Perry was my assistant coach, and she's not only a great coach, but she's a very experienced sports scientist. I think Kate's on the line. KP, if you have comments on this team, feel free to share. But we got to combine our interests and our values to prepare a season plan that addressed all of these aspects of performance sport, and then make a plan to introduce these concepts to the team. And when you look at what we wanted to achieve all together as a list, it's a lot. We had really big goals and high expectations, and it really was a lot to put on a group of 14 and 15-year-olds who really had no experience in the performance sport world yet. And as a side note, the athletes did not know we were planning to teach them all these things. They were very focused on hockey, and that was great. We just knew as a staff that there were all of these underlying benefits to helping them achieve their goal. So how did we do that? First, we had a very clear understanding as a staff for what values we wanted to communicate, and we used common vocabulary in sharing those. So when we were on the field, when we were writing emails or notes home, we were always using the same value-based vocabulary. And we also had clear routines set up for the athlete group so that we could strategically introduce these concepts and then enforce the behaviors necessary for them to act the part of performance athletes. So those were things like homework and activities, team building activities. We did a lot of journaling. We did a lot of goal setting. We did season goal setting. We did goal setting before every session. We reflected on goals after every session. We did weekly goal setting and weekly goal setting reflections. And we had communications home, regular communications home to inform and involve the parents. And we had an arrival, mental prep, warm up, compete, cool down, departure routine that we used at every single training session and at every game. And it was the same every time. And then we had what we called laws of the team, which were basically behaviors that the team committed to in order to reach their goals, and the team helped to create those. And then decision-making principles. So I always give 5 attacking principles and 5 defending principles to help support style of play and decision-making on the field. So we'd set all of that up. And then we had this framework as a staff, but we had to figure out how are we going to get buy-in from the team. Now we try to come up with a concept for each team that can be used to create like something that the group can connect with that relates to the values. And it's usually different every team. But just before I started with this group, I'd seen a presentation at a coaching conference by Trevor Reagan. And he's got a company called the Learner Lab, and we're going to just throw the website into the comments. Thanks, Haley. The Learner Lab is an awesome website. If you haven't been on it before, go and check it out. There's lots of resources, lots of free resources, a really great podcast. Talks a lot about how people learn and how to get better at getting better and emotional IQ, and just it's a really great resource for coaches, so check it out. But specifically for this context, I came across this video about tigers that I really love because it presented a concept that I could easily steer the team towards setting up behaviors and commitments for themselves that not only aligned with my own values, but also was something that I thought the athletes could get excited about. And I'm going to share a really short clip from one of these videos. I put it in a Google Doc so that you can all watch it without the video streaming lag. So I'm just going to copy it into the comments here, Haley, if you could do that. It's 2 minutes long, so go check out the Google Drive. We're going to watch the video on your own screen for the next 2 minutes, and then we'll come back together and talk about it.
After digging into the research of how to become a better learner for almost a decade, I think really the best way to explain it is to start where everybody starts, by talking about tigers. Okay, so we have two tigers. One lives in a zoo and one lives in the jungle. Obviously, these are two very different environments. The zoo, super easy. We have everything we need 24/7. Food, water, shelter. Every day is the same, and we're definitely not going to struggle very much because we don't experience the things that lead to struggle, like problems, challenges, obstacles, change. Those don't happen in the zoo. In the jungle, it's a different story. First of all, it's way more difficult there because we're on our own. We have to hunt and find water and protect ourselves. Every day is different, and every single day we face new problems, challenges, obstacles, change, which means we struggle on a daily basis. So we have two very different environments. My question to you is, which tiger learns more? Well, of course the jungle tiger did. There's a huge gap between these two tigers. But that gap isn't because of their tools. Like, both tigers were tigers. They had the same tools.
Wait, who are you? I am you. I am me. No, sir, you are you. Wait.
The difference between these two tigers was really the approach to learning. That environment that involved some difficulty and struggle allowed the jungle tiger to do something that the zoo tiger could not.
So the video goes on to ask what happens to the zoo tiger if it's thrown into the jungle. And the answer to that question obviously is a zoo tiger in the wild is a dead zoo tiger. Why? Because they've been living the comfortable, easy life. There's no skill development. They can't hunt because all its meals are made for it. They can't find shelter. They can't protect itself. The jungle tiger learns from and because of the struggles and challenges it faces by living in the wild. So what I did was I sent this video to everyone before our first get together, and I asked them to watch it and then record their thoughts in their journals. And then we facilitated a conversation with the athletes where we talked about the tiger concept and how that could relate back to this team and their training. And the group decided that a comparison could be made that walking onto the field at national championships was like being thrown into the jungle. And in order to be prepared for that, we needed to train every day like we were in the jungle. So we talked through what exactly that meant. We set some really clear expectations in terms of behaviors that we needed to see, commitments that we needed, actions that we were going to take as we prepared for nationals. And these were all behaviors and expectations that were set out by the athletes. The coaching staff facilitated the conversation, but this was very much them. And they also decided to call themselves the Jungle Tigers. It was not just a name that the coaches applied to them. It was their idea and their identity. And it really became for them a way of being and acting that they connected with. So how did we build this environment? First of all, preparation. Cannot say enough about preparation. We did a lot of work as a staff before we started to identify our coaching values, and then technical, tactical, physical, mental performance planning. We strategically identified processes that would support the learning outcomes that we were targeting, and then we made sure that these expectations were not only present at our weekend trainings, but also away from the pitch. And we did that by doing the home activities and journaling that I talked about before. Little inspirational activities and mini projects, usually around sharing photos or quotes. We did nutrition challenges and recovery challenges, like this photo here where we said, do a yoga pose in a fun location and send us a photo. And we also obviously had required physical prep and other strength and conditioning components as well on top of the team building stuff. We were very clear in our communication on what the expectations were, the commitment required to be on this team, the schedule. We had a dress code, we had clear arrival and departure routines. We also sent a weekly communication home to the athletes and, importantly, the parents with a review of the week and what we were learning and homework, and we made participation mandatory. We required that they communicate with us regularly, and we had a very active team group chat and also an Instagram account. And then we created buy-in by involving the athletes to create their team goals and allowing them to identify the behaviors necessary to reach those goals. So because the athletes had bought into this identity as the Jungle Tigers, as a staff, we made sure that we recognized and celebrated their success and their buy-in to that concept. And we did that by awarding a Jungle Tiger Award. So I went online and I ordered, not easily, I really had to search for this, but I ordered a bunch of tiger striped material and I made bandanas. And every week after training, we gifted a tiger bandana to the player that best upheld the performance behaviors. And then over the course of the summer, they all had a chance to be celebrated and presented with this award. And then all of a sudden we had this group of 16 strangers that we started with that were motivated and committed to this really big goal that they'd set out for themselves. And they were all putting up some pretty big sacrifices every week for the team. I chose this group for the case study for a reason, but before I tell you about the results, let's just remember what we talked about at the beginning when I asked you to define for yourself what is success and what is championship. Is success winning gold medals or winning championships, or can it be defined with other value-based milestones? And for this team, the Jungle Tigers, they were a team that came together and bonded faster than any group I've ever worked with. It really was amazing. They bought into the process, they lived and breathed this team, and we had very high expectations for them. They walked the walk every single step along the way. They showed up, and every athlete on the team was pushed outside their comfort zone, and every athlete rose to the occasion. But at nationals, during competition, I made a pretty significant coaching error in mismanaging the timing of the team's game day fuel and nutrition. And on the day that we were playing in quarterfinals, the whole team completely bonked, like zero energy, no legs, and we ended up losing to a team that we definitely should have beat and would have beat on a different day. But as a result, we were relegated and we didn't even have a chance to win a medal. And it was a huge loss for this group. We had every intention of playing in the final, and losing this game was heartbreaking. And there was a lot of tears at the time. But in true testament to who they were as human beings and their commitment to each other and the Jungle Tiger behaviors, they came out for the rest of the games in that event, and they continued to carry themselves really like champions. And they finished every moment as if they were still playing for that gold medal. And I think if you were to ask any of the athletes on that team, they're going to remember it for more than the results on the field. I know I had to actually look them up. I forgot that we lost. But many of the friendships that they formed this season are still really strong. And the lessons and the life skills that they learned and their ability to carry themselves and show up every day to living in the wild, those things don't disappear when you lose a game. And I think when your team can compete in pressure situations and clearly play into the values and expectations that align with your team goals, then whether you win or lose, that doesn't really matter. The team has achieved some level of success and can be really proud. I do think that value-based coaching can create strong, resilient athletes that are good humans and will take those values through into their lives and relationships and future teams. So to summarize, find the why and build a culture around that why. Every team is going to have their own style of play and their attacking and defending and transition principles and something that says who they are in the field. But in order for that to work, you have to have every player in your system on the same page. And it's important to create an environment where everyone's driving towards the same goals and holding each other accountable to the same expectations. And then regardless of which context you might be working with, you'll have a foundation of a successful team environment. Creating a culture where winning is not necessarily the focus, but where the process to get to those winning outcomes is the focus. And then you begin to create this attitude and the work ethic necessary to win championships. The championship environment, I think, is something that as coaches, we can try to develop with all of our athlete groups across the country. And we really have a role to play in teaching these behaviors and performance attitudes to what potentially will be the future of Canadian hockey. I know Field Hockey Canada is building this concept that we are a team of teams, and I really believe in that. It starts with every coach on every field across the country identifying your own why and your own coaching philosophy, and then working to get buy-in within that environment. So that's it. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present today, and I hope you enjoyed the session. And my contact is here, so feel free to connect with me if you have questions or you just want to talk coaching. And I do think we have a few minutes, so if you have questions, type them in the chat, and I'm happy to answer questions. Do you work with the athletes to decide what defines success and goal setting, or is this something that the coaching staff establishes? I think it's a little bit of both. I think the coach can set up some expectations and some behaviors and hold the team accountable, but the team ultimately sets the goals, and the team will decide at the end of the day what is successful by following, like living into those expectations and living into those behaviors. What age do you think is too young for athletes to understand this mindset? Sarah, that's a great question. I don't think it's too early. I don't think it's ever too early for athletes to start understanding that there are expectations and behaviors. And I mean, I know if my kids are 6 and 8 and I have expectations, I think every parent has expectations of their athletes. I think they just need to be in a team context, age appropriate. Having fun every single time you step on the field is a great expectation for young athletes. And that starts to build this mindset. Do you have examples of teams that did come together? Jim, by did come together, do you mean that won championships, or can you elaborate on that a little bit? Oh, did not come together. Yeah, for sure. Sometimes you have a team that maybe has difficult personalities, or there's, is maybe a little bit cliquey, and those are always really challenging teams to get them to buy into one set of goals or one set of expectations and behaviors. Takes a lot more work from a coaching staff. I think it's really about identifying something that they can all connect with, and really putting that on the group. So allowing them to come up with what's going to work for them. And for sure, sometimes it does not work. Would love to hear more about your decision-making principles. Yes, I can share those with you. Usually what I do is I have 5 attacking principles and 5 defending principles, and I write them out on a sheet, and I usually say to them, well, pin it up to your mirror in your bathroom, and read them when you brush your teeth in the morning and when you brush your teeth in the afternoon. And I have them written down here, what I used for this Jungle Tiger team. I will read them to you. They're usually a little bit different with every group, and they usually speak to how we want the style of play to go. So for the Jungle Tiger group, the attacking principles were maintain possession, change your angle, attack dangerously, outcomes in a circle, first line of defense, tackle back. So that was kind of the process of how we wanted to attack. And then the defending principles were protect the dangerous space first, stay in contention, apply constant pressure, force a turnover, transition quickly. So we talked about those principles on the field, and we applied all of our training to those principles so that the athletes could start to make decisions for themselves on the field, but also start to predict what decisions their teammates were going to make based on the attacking principles and the defending principles. Do you find more success comes from emphasizing the short-term or long-term goals of the team? I think it's important to have both. I think you have your long-term goal posted up there and everyone knows that that's ultimately what we're going for, but you also need to have those stepping stones that take you, piece by piece towards that long-term goal and start to become markers that you are on the right path and you are moving in the right direction. So I think the combination of short-term and long-term goals is really important. Do you decide on team captains? What more do you expect of them as opposed to every team member? I think it depends on the team. It depends on the group. Sometimes groups have clear leaders and they're apparent on the field and they show up every day and everyone knows who they are. And sometimes groups don't have clear leaders. Importantly, you don't want choosing your captains to become a social experiment, and you don't want it to be a popularity contest. So I think you have to be able to read your group and to read the team, and sometimes it's about identifying as a captain the person that obviously is the leader on the field, and sometimes it's about maybe identifying a leadership group and giving each of them different roles. Would you feel as strongly about parent enrollment at the older age groups like university? Obviously, it would need to be facilitated in a different manner. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the parents are always there. The parents are the support system for the athletes, even when they're in university. And it's important to keep them up to date with what's going on, but it's not necessarily as important. I would hope that by the time the athlete gets to university, they're already managing their own schedule and probably living on their own, and the parents aren't going to be as impactful in terms of like what food are they buying at the grocery store, or have you arranged your carpool. So it's less important that the parents are deeply involved in the program when they're a little bit older, but I think also it's nice to have them involved. It's nice to have the parents feel like they're part of the program, because they do commit a lot of time and money to making sure that their athletes are achieving success. Yeah, for sure, Ali, I agree. Great. Well, Kevin, I will turn this back over to you to wrap up.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. That was an awesome session, a great way to kick off the conversation this week. I know for me, as someone who's an athlete watching this, it's cool to hear the coach's perspective on a lot of these values and decision-making principles. So I really appreciate it. I thought it was awesome. So thank you. For those of you on the line, Haley's going to post the exit survey. So please take the time. It should take only a minute or two to fill out. And just a reminder that we mentioned in the opening that if you're using this to fulfill your maintenance for your NCCP certificate, please make sure to put your NCCP number down, and Jen and I will go through and make sure everyone gets their credit. So Jen, thank you very much. We recorded this session and we'll try to archive all the sessions from this week prior to the new year and get them out to all the registrants. So if you missed it, or I mean, I guess if you're watching this, you didn't miss it, but you'll have a chance to share it with maybe some of your friends as well. So Jen, thank you so much. And yeah, that's session 1 in the books. Hopefully we'll see everyone else later on today and throughout the week. So take care, everyone.